Good afternoon. Right, let's get the chat right. Let's go live chat. Bosh. Cool. So, lots happened since last live stream. Let's just get that babe sorted. There we go. A lot has happened since I was last live. Obviously done a few videos. We've had a lot of rugby union internationals. We've had some football that, for reasons unknown, is only on subscription TV only. Even though the Scotland South Africa Test match at Murrayfield drew the biggest TV audience of the weekend. So I have no idea why the subscription sports TV package actually is a working product. More people on free to air are watching it. Sort of defeats the object of subscription sports TV deals. Bogus belief. So we can discuss the TV audience for the free-to-air internationals such as the Scotland, Wales, and Ireland matches versus the England game at Twickenham. The TV audience for Scotland, South Africa was the highest sporting TV audience of the weekend, and it was on free-to-air TV. So I rest my case on the free-to-air TV argument for international sport, but for reasons only the RFU, the FA, the SFA, the Welsh FA, the Northern Irish FA, and the ECB. So we're talking about professional international sport. For reasons unknown, they have just decided to sell their sports out for as much money as possible for limited exposure, because less people are feeling engaged. Regularly comes up on debates, on forums. I know free-to-air TV is not technically free because of the TV license, but basically free to the point of access. And for those who are arguing, well, go watch the game down the pub, I'm not taking. If I was to take my little brother to the pub, I think my mum would kill me because he's not legal of age to be in the pub drinking. So I would be murdered by my parents. Should I have taken my little brother to, let's say, watch the football, the rugby down the pub, even though he does have Sky Sports, but I don't. So that argument is flawed. Why would you want to take a child to an establishment full of drunken louts? It's called bad parenting. So yeah, that's enough put. So we could argue about the TV rights debate all day long, all day long. The Scotland game was the most watched game of international sport, of any sport actually. That includes league sport. All weekend, the most watched thing on TV sports wise was the Scotland versus South Africa Test match. So the argument that free to air sport doesn't work and doesn't generate, TV audience is bollocks. The fact Murrayfield was a sellout, so free to air TV is bad for sellouts, is it? That's bollocks. Yeah, I'm hoping there's a change in culture when it comes to the TV rights for tournaments and sport. We're already seeing the generation of the 18 to 30, 34 age brackets, the 18-30 club, as I call it, turning their backs on subscription TV and Sky Sports and BT Sport. They're turning their backs on it. If you look at the people who actually pay the bills for subscription sports TV and sports subscriptions on even on Sky deals when they're doing they're not 18 to 30 years old, they are older. There is some social economic stuff with that, and that's for the other channel. But for the most part, yeah, subscription sport is a flawed business model because you actually get less customers than if it was just free to air, easy accessible. So I can see a change in how we access our media in the next 5 years. Big change, big change. On the sports side of things, the home nations did very, very well this weekend, all winning, apart from Scotland, which is a shame. Scotland played very well in patches in that game. I think they lost direction in the second half, and they played into South Africa's hands. We obviously discussed that on the video review I did of the game. Obviously, Ireland beating the All Blacks, we can discuss what that actually means as a shift in world rugby at the top of the sport. I think it's still 11 months out from the World Cup final. We're still too early to pick a favourite right now for the tournament. The All Blacks are always one of the favourites, but Ireland being the best Northern Hemisphere team, and they are by a long way in my book. That's my personal opinion. There's 11 months of rugby to play. Injuries, suspensions, and retirements, anything can happen between now and the World Cup final. To start putting label tags on teams this far out is a bit erroneous. the All Blacks will always be one of the favourites. The Springboks will always be one of the favourites. They are big game players. Um, it will be an interesting tournament. That's the best way to look at it. It's going to be an interesting tournament. Have the All Blacks already peaked with this group of players? Quite possibly last year, yes. They could have been at their best last year. Are the Irish peaking now? Quite possibly, yes. They're peaking too soon. There's a lot of unanswered questions. It's going to be interesting looking forward what happens with these teams. Scotland, they need to sort out their concentration and their direction because they seem to lose direction in a lot of games I've seen. They're very Jekyll and Hyde. They're good for patches, bad for patches in games or from game to game. So consistency is Scotland's weakness they need to work on. Wales, we now know they have strength in depth. I would argue that playing teams like Tonga and maybe not the toughest test match that they've had to play as a group. On saying that, they did beat Australia, so I would say yes, these young players for Wales have got a lot of confidence that they wouldn't have had this time last year when they did all these changes for the Georgia game. I think the Six Nations. I did mention this in the video. People are not picking up on it. They had no choice but to use their depth players in the Six Nations. When they did the experiment last year against Georgia, it very nearly backfired and was very negatively panned by fans, Gatland's choices, because some of those players were not ready at test level to take that step. They hadn't had enough game time at test level to be thrown in all as a bunch rather than drip fed into the system. The Six Nations, they had no choice but to do so, but they were playing more game time at club. And it was basically a Scarlets team with a few add-ons from Ospreys and Cardiff that went out in the Six Nations. Oh, excuse me. So when we came to the Six Nations and Wales being tested for depth, it was basically a Scarlets club side with a few Ospreys and Cardiff players sprinkled in, and they got through it. Obviously, they've had some summer tours, and now they've had some more internationals. They're rotating players. Some players are coming back from injury. We know players like Sam Warburton have had to retire because of injury. So there's some enforced changes that they have no choice but to go, right, this player is never playing again. They have a year down the line in development. Plus, Warren Gatland now is at the end of his tenure as Wales coach. World Cup's going to be the end, and then Pivac comes in to take over long term. It would have been nice to see a Welsh coach in charge of the Welsh side, but they've gone down the Kiwi route, which a lot of teams seem to be doing right now. And it seems to be paying off. South Africans and Kiwis, Springbok and All Black coaches seem to be a trend, a big trend in international rugby. Eddie Jones being the exception at a top level side, and that isn't. That's a nation of origin for a coach. England have a lot of problems. Not gonna lie, they're stuttering through this autumn. Very inconsistent. We know England's form hasn't been great in the last 18 months. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 11 months with England. I'm not sure what this England side can do. Some players are coming towards the end of their Test careers, maybe have hung on too long. The revelations by Joe Marler about his ill discipline at times also says, right, is there the right team culture? Is there the right discussions taking place about issues within the sport or within the squad openly? Are we overplaying the players? Are we over testing the players too much? There's debates about player welfare, basically. The amount of injuries that England and Wales regularly sustain, also, I'm questioning some of their training techniques. I am. A lot of the injuries take place in training. Players have to withdraw from matchday squads because they've got injured in training. So I'm looking at the injuries that the Welsh players sustain and the English players sustain regularly. So I'm looking at Warren Gatland and his coaching setup. I'm looking at Eddie Jones and his coaching setup, and I'm going, okay, why is it that your teams seem to have more injuries in training than, let's say, Scotland, Ireland, Italy, France, and the other Six Nations? Why is it during the Six Nations that those two particular nations had so many more injuries in training sessions than others? That's a question to look at. On the Southern Hemisphere point of view, South Africa, are turning things around. They're in a transition period. Australia are not the team they were a decade ago. We can safely say that Australian side is not the quality level that it was a decade or so ago. Argentina have massively improved over the last 10, 15 years. So the Southern Hemisphere is in a bit of a juggling act. I don't think Australia are going to win the World Cup. Argentina, I'm going for semi-finals again. They're proving that they can now win knockout games. That they can grind out results. They're just not quite the finished article yet. The All Blacks always dangerously consistent. Never not failed to get out of a group. Always got to the quarterfinals as a minimum. And so, yeah, the Southern Hemisphere powerhouses are in various states of transition, apart from the All Blacks, who may have peaked last year with this group of players. And I think something that held the All Blacks back in the past was the expectation and the weighing of pressure when it got to the pressure games towards the end of World Cups, and they fell apart. They got over that hurdle in 2011. The fact that they repeated in 2015 shows the quality that they had as a leadership core. We can, there's a lot of debates about the domestic, club level rugby around the world and what state it's in. But if we look at international rugby right now, there are similar issues about the other South Pacific Island nations being pillaged by New Zealand, Australia, and the European nations. Yes, they are to a point. I think it's anywhere between 12 and 29%, depending on the nation. Have players that were trained and born overseas who just got residency. I know it's now more of a global economy now, but international selection rules need to be looked at so they're not abused, so the tier 2 nations can continue to develop and be competitive. Otherwise, we're just going to see lopsided results where it's not as competitive at test level. So that's a debating point that we could have about the structures in place in the game right now. I'm going to open my curtains so there's some natural light. There's no sunlight. So yeah, there's a lot of debating points right now in rugby union, at least, both club and international level, about playing rules, how many games players should play. There's no universal rule on that, although there are rulings being put in place trying to limit the amount of games players play. It's not the same in rugby league. It's not the same in ice hockey. So either rugby unions worked up there is a player welfare issue, or players have basically said that we're feeling physically tired. We don't think we can physically keep up this intensity level and stay fit. There's obviously got to be some player feedback in that. But when it comes to other sports such as rugby league and ice hockey, you've got that Iron Man streak where players don't miss games. And some of the NHL players are playing 300-400 consecutive games. That's a lot of abuse putting on the body because they play back-to-back nights, so 2 games in 2 days, up to 4 or 5 games in a week sometimes. So it's a different sport, yes, but player welfare is a big thing, massive thing. I've debated player welfare a lot over the last year and a half. Player welfare is a massive thing over the last year and a half. That has regularly been debated by myself and people in the live stream who view and ask the questions. Player welfare is a big thing. And last night at the Bracknell Bees Milton Keynes Thunder game, there was at least 2 players who were clearly concussed in that game or were not fit to continue, even though they did. Maybe 3 players. And this is at a lower level of sport, but I was at a game last night, obviously watching these guys, and yeah, there were a couple of instances where you could clearly tell that that player was not on the same page as everyone else. And we could debate the David Milner flying through the air and landing on his head in one corner, or Josh Smith getting driven into the ball's head first, and then getting in a fight, but forgetting to take his hockey gloves off whilst fighting, which could have been done for game misconduct for that. But he didn't realise he was fighting at first. He took some big blows to the head. And scary thing was the boarding penalty, the dangerous play wasn't called, but the fight was. So I do have a question about refereeing standards and consistency at all levels. If you've got an improving sport and a growing sport, and the quality level improving, the officiating level has to improve with it. And the problem is what we're finding in a lot of sport, is we're not getting enough people wanting to be officials, be it ex-players or those just going, "Look, I think I'm capable of officiating. I'm willing to apply, go through the training, and become an official because I love the sport." There's not enough people applying to be referees, linesmen, video officials, league officials, that kind of administration of the sport and the officiating and refereeing of the sport. It doesn't matter if it's ice hockey, rugby, football, cricket. There's not enough people either willing to do it or capable of doing it, or both. And yeah, match night officials do get a lot of abuse from fans and a lot of stick when they get decisions wrong. They are human, but there is a concern that we're not developing. This is not just a UK thing. This is a worldwide thing. We're not developing enough top level referees, linesmen, administrators in sport as well. There's not enough top level people who may not be on the sporting side of things, but maybe on the more administrative side of things, getting involved for whatever reason, which is a concern. It is a concern. Obviously, the debate about Richard Scudamore receiving his £5 million bonus continues. That's not going away. Big question marks about the fact that in a consultancy role, he will earn more money than actually in a salaried role that he was doing for near on 20 years. Massive debating point. A lot of people aren't happy, me included. But the reason why I argue that it's inappropriate is clubs like Huddersfield, who are in the Premier League, are forced to shut their academy, not given support by the Premier League to keep it open via TV funds or some kind of funding in the short term, so a solution could be found. Yet the Premier League can find £5 million in which to fund Scudamore's retirement. I do not understand that. Surely the integrity of the game should come first, and supporting clubs that may be having difficulties through no fault of their own or through just lack of funds. If that £5 million had gone to Huddersfield to keep their academy open, while a long-term solution was found to why there was a funding gap for their academy or why they felt the need to close. We know why they had to close, because the bigger clubs with more money were pinching their youth players and they couldn't afford to keep them, and they weren't having enough youth players invest, and there wasn't enough investment. But that's neither here nor there. So a Premier League club forced to shut its academy, not supported by the Premier League. That's where the debate for me and the argument for me saying, well, that £5 million could have been given to Huddersfield to develop local grassroots youth talent in that part of Yorkshire. This wasn't given or offered. So that's a shame on the sport. And this is where football's got a problem. The rich clubs get richer, and the have-not clubs continue to be have-nots. And it makes for unsustainable league going forward. There are people who are arguing for this Super League. These clubs, and Arsenal have now admitted, yeah, we had meetings. So it debunks the theory from other clubs saying that this is all lies. When one of the clubs goes, yeah, we had meetings about it. We're not going to lie. Here's the thing: with the fact that lower levels of the sport are in a funding crisis, be it in the non-league, amateur, complete amateur, or the Football League, League One and League Two. Hello, Mike. We had physio this morning. It's better news than expected, which is good. So we won't have physio for much longer. We've got another 2 more sessions minimum, so another month physio, and then that's that. But I'm arguing about football here, because this is a very important point. Basically, the lower leagues around the world, it's not just England. There are funding issues, and what we've seen over the weekend with the internationals all being on subscription TV only, which is frustrating. The exposure isn't there for the lower leagues. There isn't the money in the lower leagues, and I'll argue this: if the lower league clubs are really struggling, and we keep the money in the Premier League, without the lower league support and the structures that the lower league pyramid gives in youth development, player development, promotion, relegation, that playing base, fan base, the sport dies. And we are at a crossroads where the majority of clubs in League One downwards could go out of business. in long term, because the sustainability of football isn't there, because the greed of a minority of clubs, and it's a very small minority, we should call them the Big Six, because of their greed and unsustainable greed at that, and the Premier League greed as well. We could see a crisis within not just the English game, but the world game, where it becomes unsustainable. This level of reckless financial policy, it's reckless. And if the Super League does go ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if that thing fails. But at the same time, kills domestic leagues across Europe. Um, it's called a live stream, so until you ask me questions, I'm going to keep talking to keep the stream going. You don't like what you see? Fuck off. Simple. You don't like what you see? You want to troll? Fuck off. That's my simple answer. So that's what we're doing. We're going to get rid of you because you're just here to troll. So you don't like what you see? Fuck off. Bye. I thought I dealt with that rather well. I really did. But yeah, Mike. No, I popped into your live stream yesterday for a brief period. I didn't really have time to stay for obviously the England game. Obviously, England won the game. How Harry Kane got the man of the match from reading all the match reports is beyond me. He touched the ball like 5 times in the entire game. I have concerns about this UEFA Nations League. I'm not sold on it completely. The fact that it's not accessible to millions of people. Yeah, they could do that. But talking about the TV with the England game yesterday against Croatia, the most watched sporting event this weekend was the Rugby Union Scotland versus South Africa Autumn Test International with 2.28 million people. They got more viewers for the Scotland South Africa Rugby Union International than any of the UEFA Nations League internationals by a long way. And there's one simple answer for that: free to air TV. I know free to air is a misnomer because you have to pay a license fee, but basically, the terrestrial Freeview channels, the Autumn Rugby Union Internationals, got more viewers than the subscription sports, anything. So that includes the cricket, that includes the football, and includes those rugby union internationals that weren't on free to air channels. So this is the problem football has. It actually is getting less viewers now than it was in the 80s on TV for percentage of population. It's getting less viewers because it's on this paywall in the way, and people are arguing that this paywall is a negative and an off-putting. If they want a Super League, why don't they change the format of Champions League to more of a league system? Well, that's what the group stages are, and then the best out of those groups go into the knockout stages. But you've already got these managers complaining about fixture congestion. Well, if you put this Super League into place, you don't have things like the FA Cup because they will not be eligible, or the League Cup. They won't be eligible for 2 of the major trophies in English football if the English clubs were to do this. You cannot win the Premier League because you'd be thrown out of that, and the Champions League you'd be thrown out of that because UEFA haven't sanctioned this Super League. It's ironic that this Super League idea by these 12 or 16 clubs or whatever it is comes roughly at the same time that UEFA want to introduce this new European Cup Winners' Cup style competition as a 3rd European club trophy. It is an interesting one. But without lower leagues willing to support and fans willing to support and the promotion relegation system, you take those key clubs out of the leagues they're in now, and the leagues they're in now are worthless to watch and pointless to watch. And if they then realise we've made a mistake, we want to go back to our domestic league structure, they will be starting at the bottom tier. They have been told by UEFA and the governing bodies of the leagues they're in, you'll be thrown out of, you will not be readmitted to the league you were in when you left. You'll have to start at the bottom of the professional league pyramid, which could be 2, 3, 4, or 5 levels below where they are now. So they're going to probably forge ahead. It's going to fail, and then clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona won't be in the Champions League. They'll be in the 3rd tier of La Liga structure, or the 4th professional tier of whatever it is in Spain. Juventus would be in Serie C2, I think. Is that? Yeah, I think they'll be in Serie C2, which I think is the lowest tier of professional football, I believe. Yeah. So it completely devalues the domestic competitions that we currently have. It devalues the domestic cup competitions that we currently have, and is an insult to football fans from the other 95% of football clubs in Europe, or 99% of clubs in Europe. This elitism is what's killing the sport. These are the greediest clubs in club football right now. These are the clubs that are breaching financial fair play right now. They are playing a dangerous game because UEFA could throw them out of all UEFA sanctioned competitions. That includes every single professional league in Europe. They could be thrown out of. Well, they will be thrown out of. And what I find funny is the reason why they've made so much money is because of the leagues they're in and the TV deals they've signed and the rivalries they have and the domestic fan bases they have. They risk damaging any kind of connection with. This is where football's losing reality, and it's losing touch with its fan base. It's losing touch with its roots massively. I think we could say it lost touch with its roots about 25 years ago. I actually believe the skill set now is less of a skill set than what it was in the 80s and 90s. You just have to look at the video footage. Yes, the game is a different style of game and a bit more physical and a bit slower, but it is what it is. So, yeah, we go from there. Do I see the Manchester Storm moving back to the Manchester Arena? I don't know enough about the Manchester Storm's financial situation, but in the past, teams based in Manchester and British ice hockey have failed financially because of rink issues, finances, obviously, poor management. And it's not for being bad on the ice. They've had some very good teams in Manchester, both Storm and Phoenix. It's the mismanagement off the ice. If they are to leave Altrincham and go back to the Manchester Arena, are they capable of filling that arena? How much will it cost to rent or to use the facilities there? And I'm going to shut my curtains again because now there's too much sunlight, so this is annoying. I just love autumn weather. It's frustrating. There we go. Now we've got the weather. That's about right for the lighting. Yeah, the Manchester teams in the history of ice hockey in Manchester for the last 20 years have had major issues with financial structures and financial side of the game. The Manchester Arena is a big arena when it comes to British arenas. The running cost, the rental cost, that's something that has to be taken into consideration. And can the Manchester Storm guarantee they're going to fill that to actually make a profit? They've got to make a profit at the end of the day to keep going. And we've seen a lot of financial issues with the Manchester hockey market over the years. We've seen the Phoenix go out of business midway through the 2016-2017 season. We've seen the Manchester Storm have to mothball before in the past, hence why the Manchester Phoenix came about. We have seen rink issues where they've had to rotate where they play. We shall see. I think Altrincham isn't the best rink, but it is an affordable rink for the Storm for now. I can see it as a decent solution to the problem. I don't think they can afford the Manchester Arena for rental costs because, be a temporary ice surface that has to be redone regularly, and the Manchester Arena is used for a lot of events, and it's whether the Manchester Arena are willing to also come to some kind of agreement. So there's a lot of things to look at with in regards to Manchester where they play their games, and money has been an issue for the Manchester kind of ice hockey around Manchester in general. All the teams that play in the Manchester area, like the Altrincham Aces, the Phoenix that have gone out of business, and the Manchester Storm, money has been an issue in the past and continues to be an issue now. So it is financially, finances as well are a big call of concern when it comes to where the Manchester Storm play their home games. They're not the only team to go through financial issues in British ice hockey, but for them it is a key issue that's been continuously going on in the Manchester hockey market for a long time. It doesn't matter what team it is and what level they're playing at, because what we saw with the Phoenix was a very rapid decline in fortunes over a 12-month period. where their playing situation where they're playing their home games, they end up playing at Fylde, I think it is, or Fylde, near Blackpool on a temporary rink in front of like 300 fans. So we have seen rink issues raise their ugly head in the Manchester area when it comes to professional and semi-professional ice hockey teams in the last decade or so, and money issues as well. The Elite League is an important question, and we can discuss the Elite League on the channel as much as we want. I think the issue with the Elite League is at the end of this season, is the Milton Keynes Lightning going to be able to stay in the Elite League? And will the Hull Pirates be joining the Elite League? And then what is the Elite League's plan for future further expansion? We're looking at Peterborough and Bracknell here to go up. And is it a sustainable expansion? Because how big do they want to get the league at the Elite League level? After a certain while, what size rink or arena is going to be acceptable for Elite League standard? If you are to raise the standard of the sport in this country, how big does the league get? And what kind of financial constraints or financial rulings will be in play to try and keep costs as down as possible to maximise profits? We're entering a very uncharted period in the next couple of years with the political side of things and the economic side of things, with Brexit and things like that, which will have a massive impact on British sport. And no one's really thought to ask these questions about the impact of some of the political and economic decisions our country is taking right now on British sport long term. No one's decided to look at the impact studies, because British sport gives a lot to the economy, both financially and with jobs and tax receipts, and obviously people working for sports clubs and sports venues. So no one's done an impact survey on British sport. No one's decided to look at, okay, what could be the possible outcomes and impacts. And the Manchester Storm have had money problems in the past. So if there is a negative impact to be had, it could be financially. And that could have a devastating impact across a wide variety of sports in this country. Not just ice hockey, not just football. There could be massive implications in the next 3-4 months that we don't even know yet. So we have to see what happens coming out of the next week or so, what agreements are reached, and what goes on from there, and how. And it's a whole load of bull crap that was easily avoidable, but unfortunately people in charge of this country haven't been bothered to avoid it. On the football side of things, I think the UEFA Nations League has got rid of the pointless friendlies. We can all agree on that. Whether it's the best format to get rid of friendlies is another question. I'm not still completely sold, because last night, Mike, you were talking about how if it was a score draw, one team went through. If it was a goalless draw, another team went through. Obviously, we won on the night, but had we had a 0-0 draw, we go out apparently, or whatever it was. I found that kind of mathematics behind it weird. A draw is a draw to me, because the goals for and against, the goal difference would be exactly the same if you're drawing a game. If you lose a game, you lose a game, and yeah. So I'm interested to see, how this UEFA Nations League experiment continues. Is it going to be a one-off tournament, or is this a long-term plan? Well, that's just bizarre. You should always go on goal difference. Fuck the head-to-head results. That's where it gets really unfairly confusing, because if that was a league campaign, you would look at goal difference first, and then you go to head-to-head. If the goal difference is exactly the same, then it goes to head-to-head. If the head-to-head is exactly the same, then this is where I think there are some flaws with this UEFA Nations League concept. And it'd be interesting to see if UEFA want to keep this tournament going long term, or this structure to qualification for tournaments, major tournaments long term. Obviously, because they want to expand the Euros, and obviously the World Cup's getting expanded as well, so there'll be more European teams go to tournaments every 2 years. The issue I also have is the TV rights. Obviously, free-to-air TV used to have all the England internationals. Now they don't. And as I said earlier, the most watched sporting, I think the most watched thing on TV this weekend was the Scotland South Africa international. in rugby union at Murrayfield on Saturday evening. That got more people watching than any of the UEFA Nations League games at all so far this season. So that shows a flaw in the thinking. You want to get more people actively involved in the sport watching. Just saying. And also, I've noticed when I do manage to find an illegal stream, some of these UEFA Nations League games or these or sports on subscription only TV, they're not sellouts. There's plenty of empty seats. So the subscription TV argument being good for sport argument is flawed. We know that if you put a sport on free to wear and have a reasonable amount of access, but you don't show, let's say, every available game, but you have a reasonable amount of access, viewership on TV goes up, and viewership from interest going to stadiums and actually going to the game live goes up. So crowd numbers go up, viewership numbers go up. You put it on behind a paywall, those things go in exactly the opposite direction. But hey, the mainstream sports in this country have sold their soul for greed. We saw that with the Scudamore payout, when under his watch, a Premier League club has been forced to shut its academy in the last year. Yet it seemed fit to give him a £5 million payout, which could have easily gone to Huddersfield to keep that academy open. Yeah, at least until a long-term solution could be found in the short term. That's unacceptable to me. That's where I'm arguing the point. If he's been such the golden child of the Premier League, why is it then that so many clubs are facing administration? Why is it that the parachute payments is a flawed system? Why is it that financial fair play is failing? Why is it that fit and proper persons test, which is basically a joke because I can't see how it's being enforced at all. There's a lot of problems. Fans think ticket prices are unsustainable, which they are. And I'm going to do a video arguing about European football having, should it bring in a salary cap and a spending cap, because I do honestly believe that there has to be a cap on the amount of money paid for transfers, and there has to be an amount of money capping wages, because we're reaching a point which is completely unsustainable. And other sports do salary caps rather well. I think football is lagging behind in so many aspects of governance and of accountability. Oh, I'm coughing to death here. It's not good. I'm deciding to have a coughing fit. But yeah, no, I'm surprised European football or world football hasn't brought in a universal salary cap system and transfer cap system, because what we're seeing is completely unsustainable financial mismanagement, and I'm going to call it that. The over commercialization now and the overinflated transfer market, overinflated players' wages sum up the state of English football and world football. I don't know how much more sustainable this can be. Especially when players like Danny Rose are coming out and saying 50 grand a week. I'm worth double that. I'm worth 100 grand a week. So when a player's complaining that 50 grand a week isn't, oh, I can't live on 50 grand a week, you know, that's for me a pretty damning indictment of what bubble they live in and how out of touch they are with the working man who wouldn't earn 50 grand before tax in a year. The average worker is not even close to that. You halve that, that's the average worker's wage a year. He earns that in a week, and he was kicking up a fuss about not being paid enough. You're paid more than enough. This is where I think, you know, we need to have the debate. And I would love any sit down with a football player and go, you're paid too much. And if they argue that, oh no, I can't live on anything less than 150 grand a week, well, quick tip: buy a smaller house. Don't buy a Bentley. Buy I don't know, a Volkswagen Lupo, and actually live within your means. Oh no, the Neymar transfer did not start the transfer inflation. It was already happening. It just had gone from 90 million for a player in Gareth Bale to 250 million in the space of literally little more than a year, 2 years. I wouldn't say Neymar started the transfer inflation. It was just a big byproduct of what had been happening in the last 5 or so years. When you think that Ronaldinho cost around 30 million, I think, from Barcelona to AC Milan or whatever it was, or was signed for 30 million by one of those clubs, it puts it into perspective that a world-class player like Ronaldinho, who won World Cups, by the way, and didn't throw himself, it just shows that in 2006, Ronaldinho was worth 30 million. Now Neymar, a player who is nowhere near as skilled as Ronaldinho, not even close in my eyes, is worth 4 or 5 times as much. Bollocks. I know this is where I disagree with you, Mike. I think if I was to sit down in the room with Danny Roseman and said that, I'd be like, hang on, mate, do you live in the real world? £50,000 a week That's a week he's on. It's not like he's on 50 grand a year and he's playing lower level sport and he wants a pay rise because the club can afford it. He's on 50 grand a week and feels that is not enough. I don't give a fuck if someone's getting paid double than me. I'm on 50 grand a week. That works out. I'm a millionaire pre-tax, and post-tax I'll still be a millionaire. It's a disgusting indictment that a club like Huddersfield can't afford to keep its academy open, and the Premier League doesn't help them. But the Premier League is more than happy for players to be well overpaid for what they do. And yeah, they could get injured at any time, but that's where like post-retirement training comes in. Actually, putting players through university, through a college, giving them a trade. This is where people forget Stuart Pearce is a fully qualified electrician and plumber. He This is where football's gone wrong. It's not giving these young players a trade should they get injured and not be able to continue, or if they don't make the grade, they're told you go be a football player. And when they're thrown on the scrap heap, they find adjusting to the real world impossible. This is where I have a lot of respect for those players who've gone through the non-league route, like Ricky Lambert, Grant Holt, Jamie Vardy, and made it to the top level. Players like Danny Rose demanding twice as much money. He's not that good a player. Just putting it out there. He's won nothing with Tottenham. How much silverware has he won? Fuck all. So in my eyes, you don't deserve it. And even get paid 100 grand a week is pretty sick. I'm sorry, but on some of the salaries I was on some of the wages I was on, I'd be lucky to earn that in a year or 2 years. So no, I would actually have to sit down with these players and go, you have to live in a real world. You have to get yourself another skill like, I don't know, business marketing or plumbing or painting. Because guess what? You're going to spend all that money when you retire, and then you're going to be broke and end up like Paul Gascoigne. Paul Gascoigne is the prime example of why we should give young sportsmen training in other careers other than the sport they're in, and actually give them vocational training, and make sure that along the whole path of their career, they keep up this, they still have that vocational training done in their spare time. It makes them A, seem more down to earth, more human. B, it gives them a skill that when they do have to retire through age or injury or ill health, they have something to fall back on other than just punditry or getting sacked from football management every 6 minutes. Because at the moment, the structures that are in place, there's not enough emphasis, if it is there publicly, on giving young players when they're in academies that. I've seen the Gascoigne thing. I knew about his arrest a couple of months ago. To be honest, he probably wasn't in a fit state to realise what he was doing. But this Paul Gascoigne is a prime example of why we should give young academy players vocational training in carpentry, in painting, in electricals, in sales, even business management. Doesn't matter what it is, they should be given educational courses throughout. And I know some academies do that, but a lot of these players, once they hit 18, they give up on that, making sure they have another skill other than sport, and they go into sport. They fuck up at some point, be it they get suspended, banned, they retire, they don't fulfill their potential, and they end up like Paul Gascoigne. They end up like Paul Gascoigne because they weren't given something else to focus their energies, and give them a career post football. Because not every football player is going to be. Oh, great, Jared Hayne. I did a video on Jared Hayne and what he would be doing next year when it comes to his NRL career. But Jared Hayne, I think he's a wanker anyway. Again, another overpaid player for the sport he plays in. There's no way some of these players can justify their wages to me. To play professional sport is a privilege, not a right, and you're privileged to be in that position. You shouldn't expect to get. Oh no, there's a guy playing at another club. Another club's wage structure should have nothing to do with what you're doing at your club. You should play the sport because you enjoy it. The payment's a bonus. To keep demanding more, no, you're bigger than no player's bigger than the club. You're out. The Gascoigne one I knew about. The Jared Hayne one I knew there were allegations in San Francisco to do with his time in San Francisco. I was not aware there was any pending allegation or investigation into him in Australia. So that's going to be interesting, and I'm going to have to look into that and do my research. But I've been following Jared Hayne's messy career since he went to the NFL and came back. I think since 2014, I don't know who's been advising him. They haven't done a good job. Also, on his fitness side, he's not fit enough to play rugby league at the moment. His fitness is questionable. Oh Christ! So he's really in the shit. Well, it highlights an issue clearly there. That's clear. Two separate incidents that involve Jared Hayne in the space of 4 years. There is definitely an issue with the individual. be it on a variety. To be honest, I think he screwed up the day he decided to walk away from Parramatta and go to the NFL. Since 2014, whoever's been advising him and whoever's around him in that advisory circle, friendship circle, leading him down a dark path. And also it shows highlights his lack of respect for women. So that's an educational thing as well. It's shocking that in 2018 we have to continue talking about education, about gender equality and personal space and what is appropriate behaviour for both men and women, because women fuck up as well. Hope Solo, for example, beating a child and child neglect, but we can discuss Hope Solo another time. Female football player. I'm going to have to look into what's screwed up with Jared Hayne this time. Whether I do a video on it or not is another thing. I won't do a video on Gascoigne. I won't do a video on Jared Hayne. They are still ongoing legal things, and this is where people forget when they are YouTubers or they are on Instagram or they are on Twitter, that when something like this happens, oh yeah, the motor neuron player, I've done a video on that. Stephen Darby, yeah, he's got motor neuron. There's a couple of them actually. There's about 3 or 4 that currently have motor neuron disease. 2 are more high profile than others, but yeah, no, there's one this season who was diagnosed, whose wife is Steph Houghton, the England women's captain. And yeah, there's been some pretty the Gascoigne and Jared Hayne situations, as obviously there's investigations going legal, and there will be trials or there will be court cases. It again, as I said with the Paddy Jackson, and as I said with Chet Evans and various things like that, until all is done and dusted, and Cristiano Ronaldo as well. There's firstly, it's inappropriate to do videos on it, even though it's a very important issue, because as there's ongoing legal aspects to it, that could end up affecting a legal trial, as we have found out in many high-profile cases. People commenting without prior knowledge of the legal ins and outs and what's actually going on, making speculative things on the internet, which then prejudice a criminal trial because it becomes trial by media rather than actually a jury of your peers. And there's all sorts of legal ramifications. But no, Jared Hayne, he's been going downhill for 4 years. As soon as he went to the NFL and tried his hand, because you have to go through the player pathway program, which takes a full year before you can actually even do preseason training in the sense of play the preseason games, the exhibition games as they call it. So through the entire process, something was amiss. Something's gone terribly wrong here with him. Paul Gascoigne, we've known he's had issues with alcohol and drugs for years. I think Gascoigne might have inappropriately groped someone. Basically, he was probably so off his tits on drinking drugs, he didn't know what he was doing. Jared Hayne, that's a different kettle of fish, because this is the second time Jared Hayne has had this accusation against him. That highlights a massive issue with his respect for women. First up, we saw it with Paddy Jackson. But there's a massive issue within, I would think, rugby league as well, with this macho lads culture. I don't know whether it's what it is with the Australian macho culture, but there is a clear issue with culture within sport. Now, we know he's no longer with Parramatta. We know they didn't re-sign him for this coming season in 2019, so he was basically a free agent. He will still be on a contract until the full pre-season starts in December, January time. But basically, he was on the shop market. No one's going to want to touch him now. Not with these allegations against him. He's done. He's done. Done. But he's not the first NRL player to have this kind of accusation against him. We saw it with Al Nasri or whatever it is, from Canterbury back in the day. And there was allegations about a pre-season tour that got out of hand and all sorts. But it does highlight to me that the NRL has a massive issue with not just gender equality or respect to women or whatever it is, but there's a drink issue, because I wouldn't be surprised if there's definitely alcohol involved in this one. So there's a drinking culture, which leads to then players getting involved in situations they shouldn't be in. We've seen it with other players like Mitchell Pearce, the urinating in a dog's mouth and then dry humping a dog. Yeah, he did that. Is it Josh Carney? Multiple drink driving offences and antisocial behaviour offences, including aggressive violence. And now we're seeing with Jared Hayne. There are other players as well who had drink and drug and betting issues, but it does say to me that there is a culture issue within the sport in Australia um, that is there, and it's a long term issue, and clearly it's got to be tackled head on. And I'll be interested to see what the slimy, and I will call him slimy, Todd Greenberg has to say on this, because technically Jared Haynes is still a registered NRL player. He's still registered as available to play in the NRL. You know, and it'll be interesting to see how the NRL tackles the issue of sexual violence against women, or violence against women in general, or violence against either gender, to be honest, and tackles the issue of alcohol, and tackles the issue of recreational drug misuse, because we've seen players do that as well, and generally looks long and hard at itself, going, is our culture within dressing rooms acceptable for modern society? But Jared Hayne, he's always caught. He's been a controversial figure now for at least 4 or 5 years. We have to see what happens over the next. I don't know how the Australian legal system works, so again, to pass comment on an Australian legal matter again would be inappropriate of me. A lot of social media users tend to forget that they also have a legal obligation not to fucking say stuff that can prejudice any kind of ongoing legal investigation or trial. And a lot of them forget that, and they say stuff, and then that causes a trial or legal action to collapse. It's happened loads of times over here in the UK. I don't know what the Australian side of things is. Back to the payment side of things. Jared Hayne, one of the biggest paid stars in the NRL. Paul Gascoigne was one of the top paid English players in the 90s and the 80s. So again, an argument again, when they were young, they were given a lot of money very, very quickly. They weren't advised correctly, and they've ended up in this kind of situation. Also, it seems to me that high-profile sportsmen don't necessarily live in the real world. From a very young age, they're sort of taken out of the real world. And no, but seriously, Paul Gascoigne was one of the highest paid English players in the late 80s and into the 90s, where he was playing in Europe. He was obviously a high level international. Was playing for some big clubs at the time in Europe. Played in Scotland and in Italy, and earned some big money. He was given a lot of money at a very young age. He was seen as this prodigious young talent. And okay, in real terms, he would have probably got paid today's wages. He would have. At the time, he was getting paid a lot of money in what was at the time a lot of money in the 80s and the 90s, and probably wasn't guided down the right path. It's later transpired he does have mental health issues. He does suffer from bipolar. Had we had a better understanding of mental health 20, 30 years ago, this may not have happened. But also, if he had the right people around him going, you don't want to do that, you want to focus on this aspect of your life, it might have ended up a different story. Jared Hayne, again, one of the highest paid rugby league players of the modern era, superstar player. He's won State of Origin, he's played in the World Cup, he's a cross-country international, he's won the gold medal with Fiji at the Sevens at the Olympic, all this kind of crap. Again, poorly advised, been given a lot of money at a young age, because he was a superstar when he was younger. There's no doubt on that. He was a try-scoring machine, especially 2009. So he was given a lot of money very young, and he's obviously also been badly advised, and he's also fallen afoul of the law more than once. He's caught in controversy again more than once, and it raises the question not just of the individual and his respect for women, but it also raises an issue: is he being? Oh yeah, no, the Hayne plane took off, hit turbulence, and then crashed into a mountain. But it does raise the question: is a lot of these young sportsmen, we've seen it across so many sports, where they're given a lot of money, big contracts when they're in their late teens, early 20s, and you got to put yourself back when you were, like, let's say in your late teens to mid 20s. Like, you're given 50 grand a week. What are you going to do with that? You're going to do some stupid shit. You're going to do some real stupid shit. Like, honestly, when I was in my early 20s, my dad passed away, and I inherited £10,000. I did some stupid shit with 10 grand. You imagine what multi-million dollar, £1 million, and £1 million contracts, Um, you can just imagine what's going to happen, can't you? Especially when you've got a large group of young lads all getting paid similar amounts of money in a dressing room with very, that you can see the mayhem. There, yeah, yeah, I've done it myself, and that's just from 10 grand. Imagine getting 10 grand a week rather than 10 grand lump sum for a year. Imagine getting 10 grand a week minimum. Imagine getting 10 to 100 grand a week, depending on what level you're at. But imagine that you're getting paid a year's salary for an average worker in your country a week. What do you think is going to happen with someone who's 19, 20, 21 years old, not fully matured yet? You're going to need that experienced voice, be it an agent or a parent or an advisor, going, hang on a second, just put that in a savings account, take up a trade, do some, when you're not training for football or rugby or rugby league or ice hockey, there's an online course in carpentry you could do. There's an online course in business management. There's an online, instead of guiding these young kids down the educational and still doing the sport route, like some teams do, but not all, which I think should be compulsory at that level. Just saying, they're just given these big money contracts and they just screw about. Do I think F1 needs a salary cap? It needs some kind of spending cap. I think there are several sports that could use some kind of financial cap in place. I don't think F1 will go down that route though. F1 is in a crossroads right now. It's at a crossing point between the old Bernie Ecclestone era and this new Liberty Media era, and some of the bigger teams such as Mercedes and Ferrari are basically throwing their toys out the pram because Liberty Media want to make the sport more of a balanced competition. And of course, Ferrari and Mercedes want to win all the time, and they don't want to share the toys. Um, we have seen teams smaller than Minardi. It was called HRT, Hispania Racing Team. Minardi is now Toro Rosso, so Minardi's still technically going, just under a different name. Minardi was the ultimate underdog story, and they were, I think, one of the best independent teams, possibly Sauber alongside. Sauber could be another independent team that's had reasonable success. Jordan had a decent run, and they've now become Force India. But again, the issue lies with again, yeah, money, and is it equally distributed? No. Are some of the bigger engines, bigger teams, which also are manufacturer teams as well, they're throwing their toys out the pram because Liberty Media want to make the sport more like NASCAR in the sense that it makes the sport an equal playing field. And Ferrari and Mercedes are like, no, we're going to throw our toys out the pram and throw a hissy fit because we don't get our way anymore. This is the crossroads the sport's reaching. It doesn't help that Jean Todt, the guy in charge of the FAA, was the team principal of Ferrari for the better part of 2 decades. So there is too much politics. Oh yes, I think you saw out of my Twitter feed. You saw my Twitter the F1 Macau last year with that GT supercar race, where like 1 million to 100, I think it was 50 million pounds worth of car piled up, and I think the next corner. Yeah, no, Sophia Flörsch, she's raced in the British touring car support package a couple of years ago in the Ginetta series for juniors, and she had a very similar accident where she was unsighted, and it wasn't her fault, but she had a big shunt. And this was the same year that Billy Munger lost both his legs, or a couple of years ago when Billy Munger lost both his legs. What I get now, this is what I did say about her accident on Twitter. I've seen the footage of that one corner. You don't see the preceding sector. You do not see the corners and the straights beforehand to lead to her flying at 179 mile an hour into the catch fence. The fact that she took off saved her life. It does, but the fact that her car got airborne, actually, even though it looks spectacular, it saved her life. Had she gone head on into that concrete barrier, she's dead. It also would have meant that the car she hit would have also gone head on or side impact if they'd both gone off rather than her clipping it and him going to the side. They would have both, one would have been paralysed and she would definitely have been killed. For those who don't understand that F3 is a feeder series for GP2 and F2 and Formula 3000 and all these kind of lower series, she's been racing since she was 5, 6 years old in go-karts. She's not inexperienced in a motor racing sense. They start them young in karting all the way up to senior level. But this does raise the question about street circuits and single seat open wheel car racing. It's not a good mix. When it goes wrong on a street circuit, especially a circuit like Macau, which is known to be lethal. It has killed people. It's killed a lot of people. We saw motorcycle racing there last year, kill a British rider, Haggerty, I think his name was, died. Macau is a killer of a circuit. Open cockpit racing, like single seaters, I'm not a fan of them. I always cringe when I'm watching the British touring car package and I'm seeing the Formula 4 series, where the series where Billy Munger lost both his legs a couple of years ago. And I was actually watching live when you're actually on board camera with him as he crashes, and you actually feel the impact. So it raises a lot of questions. So yeah, there are some concerns. Macau is a lethal track, but street circuits and single-seater open-wheel race cars are not a good mix at all. There's no runoff. There's nowhere to go. It is exciting to watch, but at the same time, it's terrifying to watch. What we need to see is the full section before, because whatever's happened coming into that corner has clearly led to her to be unsighted and clipped the car in front. Now, either she has had a stuck open throttle or brake failure, or both. Then it's not her fault. If her throttle is stuck open and her brakes have failed, that's just a mechanical failure. It happens. There's also been concerns that yellow flags were being waved earlier in the sector before, which is, incorrectly, which has caused the other car to slow down on the racing line, which is dangerous, and she's had to veer slightly to the left. We don't see enough of the footage of the section before the accident. We just see the end of the accident as she just flies across the TV screen. But no, I don't like Macau. I don't like street circuits in general with single seat race cars. Street circuits with touring cars, great fun, absolutely great fun, because the drivers are generally going to survive an accident. But Macau is a killer. It is a lethal track. It kills a lot of people. It's too narrow. It's too narrow for modern sports cars now. It's far too narrow. You just got to look at the any race that takes place on Macau. Any saloon car racing, even the small baby K-class saloons that they have from Japan racing there, there's not enough room. When one car hits the barrier or runs wide into the barrier and it just goes back across the track, there's nowhere to go, and it leads to 5 to 10 to 15 car pileups. It's like playing Forza, basically, on an online forum of Forza. There is not enough room. It's not a safe track. The fact that it's still on any kind of FIA calendar is beyond me. And don't get me wrong, I love my motorsport. I love my motorsport. I do. It is a dangerous occupation. But the fact that in that accident, 5 people had to go to hospital, including a couple of stewards, I believe, the other driver. I think one of the photographers that was hit got liver lacerations, so it was a nasty accident. I think they put that media block in the wrong place. That's again down to the race organisers. The fact that had she gone head on into that corner, she's dead. So the barriers aren't safe. If that was NASCAR, there's safety barriers where it absorbs the impact and it's different. That is a solid concrete barrier. That is a killer. It doesn't matter if that's a single seater or a full-on reinforced roll cage V8 supercar touring car from Australia. You're dead hitting that. I'm sorry, at that speed, you're dead. I've long had concerns about Macau, and now we're hearing that F1's going to Vietnam in 2021. So again, tight, twisty street circuit. I don't know how many more of these the top level FIA are going to allow for single seat race cars. They are just inherently unsafe for them. Because of the way the downforce works and the aero packages work on single seat open wheel race cars, it's very, very hard to overtake. Oh, it's Macau. It's a tax-free zone, so it's China. Health and safety. What's that? It's called natural selection, right? It's called population control in China. It's a bit of a joke, but no, it's Macau. It's China. It's one of those independent territories of China, such as Hong Kong, very similar to former European colony. Still keeps its old European legal system that the Portuguese put in place. But no, Macau is being known as it's like the Nürburgring of street circuits. You want to do it, but you have a high chance of dying doing it. I don't know how they get an insurer. Uh, because motorsport is just automatically lethal. No track is 100% safe. People have died almost every track in the UK. You're not going to make any track 100% safe. Um, Motorsport, I think you have to have a certain competency to race, and once you've got your FIA racing license, you're deemed to be insurable. And as long as you don't get your license revoked, you have insurance. So that's down to the individual racer, and they do risk assessments. Are these cars suited to this track? Um, this is why MotoGP doesn't go to Monza, but superbikes do, because there's a power differential. Um, no, that's just down to where they installed the media block. Um, they obviously felt at the time it was safe, but they were assuming cars would go straight onto the barrier at about 110 mph maximum, not 170. And they were also not expecting that if a single seat race car clips another one, it gets airborne. They failed to realise that F3 cars are basically baby version of F1 cars. Once you lift that front wing and the air goes underneath, they go airborne. You lose the grip to the road. It basically becomes a small plane. Because of the under tray being solid, it does sort of act like a plane's wing. And once a F1 car gets airborne, it's harder for it to be controlled. And if it goes airborne at a certain speed, it will stay. We've seen it also in the Formula E, the first ever race with Nick Heidfeld flying in a similar accident. So the single seat racing, it doesn't matter if it's Formula E, where they don't actually have fully exposed wheels. They have sort of wheel arch covers. It doesn't matter if it's F1, Formula E, IndyCar. When a car gets airborne, it's just a missile. That's all it is. It doesn't matter what level of single seat racing we're talking about. We've seen it in IndyCar, we've seen it in Formula E, we've seen it in F1 multiple times, and now we've seen it in Formula 3. This is not the first massive smash in F3. Um, there'll be people going, "Oh, but she's a girl; she shouldn't be motor racing." We've had that argument. That's bollocks. She's a very talented young female driver. Um, but no, we've that's down to it, it's a debating point. We could debate the pros and cons of the Macau Street Circuit until I go blue in the face. It's it's the Monaco of the Far East. It's the Nurburgring of street circuits. It is that difficult. It's that dangerous. It's far more complicated than Monaco. It makes the Singapore one, which is one of the longest circuits in street circuit history, look dull. Um, oh yeah, um, Sophia Flörsch. I've seen her race, so I know she's talented. I know she's capable of handling um, powerful cars. She's been doing it for 12 years. There have been some very talented female saloon car drivers. There's Caruso, the motorcycle rider. She's won the 300cc World Championship in superbikes. So there are some exceptionally talented female motorsport in rallying, touring cars, GT racing, enduro racing, single seaters. The fact they're not in F1 is a lot of bollocks. Um, but that's to do with the sport structures. And yeah, motorsport is inherently sexist. Not gonna lie, it's not as open to women as it should be. But no, motorsport does take away that gender inequality. I've seen women do enduro racing, Dakar Rally, motocross. I've seen women do motocross. It's going to take that one woman to win a big event. We've seen it with Danica Patrick in the IndyCar. She did win a race in IndyCar, and she won an IndyCar pole as well, and she won a couple of NASCAR poles with Danica Patrick. She, I think, was the trailblazer for women's motorsport in the last decade, in the sense that she was racing week in, week out against men rather than just getting the odd race appearance. And she took a hell of a lot of crap from, well, NASCAR is a redneck sport, it's not lie. The predominantly white, middle-aged NASCAR fan, what's a woman doing driving? She shouldn't be here. She got a NASCAR pole and she won an IndyCar race. She's just as competent as some of the men here. The fact she didn't race on good teams is another thing, and the way like her departure was handled was bad. I don't think it was well dealt with by the sport. They could have handled it in a better way. But she's now decided to retire from all forms of motorsport at the top level and take a sabbatical. So she's been forced out of the sport because of sexism. Absolutely. But no, the Macau track, No, there were issues with the marshals waving yellows incorrectly. That's what we've been told. But until we see the onboard footage from all the cars near the incident to actually work out what's happened, we don't know what's happened in the section coming up to that corner. What I would be interested in seeing a car onboard camera from a car behind, and another camera angle from looking at the crash to see what's caused her to hit the car. Is it a brake failure? Is it a sticking throttle? If it's one of those things, it's not her fault. If she's been unsighted, it happens. Macau is a very narrow circuit, and if a car is slowing on the racing line, you're in trouble. I wouldn't say all NASCAR fans think that, but there is a significant vocal proportion of fans that were less than supportive of her efforts, and that was a shame. I think that was a crying our shame, because but then we can discuss the state of America now. I don't want to get into a political discussion. There are some sports that are inherently sexist, and we can leave it as that. I don't want to go into a deep discussion on this because then it just gets into mudslinging, and I try and keep politics as separate from the channel as possible, although it is hard at times because sport and politics are intrinsically linked. But no, the accident at Macau, horrific. I'm not gonna lie. That is for the other channel. It is actually, and I'm actually doing a video in the next couple of days looking at Western politics and where we're at in the last decade. So since the financial crash, what has caused a lot of the social ills that we have in the Western world, and that will be interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if I get a lot of trolls for that, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm just going to say it how it is, that I hate the hard left and I hate the far right. And unfortunately, if you say things like that, people still think you support one or the other. And I'm like, no, I seriously dislike what is going on with the fringe parties in society. But again, that's another channel, and we will have a live stream on there, so this will be interesting. Let's see how many morons we get, and how many soy boys I have to deflate, and how many fucking feminists I have to put in their place, and how many fascists need to be re-educated, because I'm going to come across a lot. Which is why I've not done a live stream on the other channel yet. I've seen how other channels have had to deal with so much abuse. That's something that I'm battling and preparing for. But what we've seen so far on this channel, for the most part, we've had a couple of trolls, and a couple have been very persistent. But for the most part, we've had reasonable debate from different perspectives, and we're not always going to agree on every perspective that you or I or anyone on the chat is going to come up with. But that accident in Macau, I think we can all agree Macau is a lethal circuit. End of. It doesn't matter that it was a female driver. If that was a male driver, the same concerns would be there about track safety. Even if it was a more experienced driver, who's had an extra 10, 15 years of driving single-seaters or race cars in general, I can see that accident happening again at Macau, maybe on a different corner. But as I said last year with the GT race, when you had like 15, 20 car pile up coming into, I think, the corner after, or the section before, I'm not quite sure. It was one of the tight sections coming around. One car got it wrong, went into the barrier. It happens, but it was on the first lap. So you've got all these cars jostling for position on a very tight circuit. One goes into the barrier, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it just piled up and piled up. So about 5 cars got out that instant without damage, because they were in front of the car that just straight lined the corner and got it wrong. For whatever reason, mechanical failure or just driver error, and then every other car piled up behind. So how long Macau stays as a street circuit, I don't know. But we saw it with Long Beach, California, that it got to the point where that was getting so dangerous that IndyCar weren't happy to continue doing it. We see it with St. Petersburg in Florida as well. Their street circuit, that is, I shut my eyes with the St. Petersburg street circuit in Florida. I actually shut my eyes when I'm watching some of the racing going around there, going, is anyone going to live? And it's a wider street circuit. It's one of the wider street circuits. But I'm just like, if you're off racing line there, you are going in the wall, because the marbles and the rubbish on the track, you are not going to survive. I've been watching a lot of videos about the Nürburgring as well, and we can discuss some of these circuits actually being killers, and they are. The Nürburgring Nordschleife claims between 3 and 12 lives a year in all events, and that's actually that's in sanctioned racing events. That's not in public alone. That's including sanctioned race events. It averages 3 to 12 a year on the Nordschleife. On the Nürburgring GP circuit, there's been a couple as well. So there are some circuits that are generally killers. Thruxton, another one. Fastest average speed in Britain, if not in Western Europe, for a street circuit, without a kilometre long straight. Monza, that's just lethal. And that's a simple circuit in layout. You look at the layout of Monza, it's not hard. No, the chicanes are put in for a reason, and even those chicanes are lethal. Imola, there you go. There's a circuit that's claimed a fair few lives in the last couple of decades. Remember Senna and Ratzenberger that weekend? Yeah, that's another circuit that's pure lethal. And they've made alterations, and it's more dangerous now than what it was before they made the alterations because cars are more powerful. So there we go. There are some circuits that are just generally gonna kill you. What the Sophia Flörsch accident reminds me of is Barrichello's accident at Imola the day before Ratzenberger died. Again, car got a single seater, more powerful car, mind, but a single seater got airborne, and obviously for whatever reason got airborne off a bump, and it flew and it landed on the barrier. So we already knew that a circuit was dangerous. The fact that they went ahead with that race weekend and had 2 fatalities, one in qualifying and one in the race, and they continued racing there for another decade, I have concerns about the FIA and their safety protocols. While I'm not against Imola per se, you talk about games console and stuff like that. I used to, do the old games consoling. Even on a games console, I could never do Imola clean. I would always crash and always at the corners that were lethal. So even with like computer game, could never ever do Imola safely, ever. It doesn't matter if it was F1, touring cars, super bikes. Doesn't matter what the game was. I could never do Imola safely, which makes me wonder, what they need to do to Imola to make it actually as safe as possible. You're never going to take away the risk with motorsport, but there are some circuits that are almost undrivable. The funny thing is with the Nürburgring, it's actually very drivable. It's people overdrive it. Niki Lauda, he actually did crash on the Nordschleife, on the Green Hell, as Jackie Stewart called it, which is why they no longer do Grand Prix racing at the Nürburgring on the full Nordschleife and GP circuit. It's too lethal. They only do it on the GP circuit now, which is only 3 miles long rather than the 14 miles it would be if you combine the two together. It's the way the track is laid out. It's exceptionally rural. It's in the mountains, and there's a village in the middle of it because it actually is based around actual roads that go into the village of Nürburg in southern Germany. Niki Lauda's accident is one of the most terrifying. The fact he finished that season and raced for many more years after that is testament to his character. The fact that his health is wrecked and he's going to die a lot sooner than some of his compatriots, James Hunt notwithstanding, because James Hunt's already dead, says something. But that accident, and he was one of those who was arguing against racing there, saying today the weather's not right. I don't feel this is not safe. And the weather wasn't perfect that day. There was a hanging mist as well, and there have been issues in qualifying and free practice with a few accidents. And Niki Lauda, much like Mark Webber as he became, was in charge of the drivers' union, and they put it to a vote, and he was outvoted. And they said, "No, the race is going ahead." And he went, "Okay, I'll race then." And he raced under protest. But that was the last race in the F1 that took place at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. And he crashed on a straight as well. It wasn't he crashed on a corner. He came out of a corner and then clipped another car. There were several cars involved in his accident. It wasn't just Lauda rolling his car. It was a multi-car accident. It just so happened his car caught fire. And that's partly to do with the car safety as well. But track safety was a big thing. Jackie Stewart, regularly banged the drum of driver safety. I now think they've gone too far with some of the safety measures they put in. It makes the driving less challenging, um, and but at the same time, there are some circuits that are just pure and utterly lethal, absolutely lethal. Plus, I don't think F1 would work on the old Nurburgring because it's just so long that the tyres wouldn't even. I wouldn't be surprised if the tyres would actually survive 2 laps there before they fail under the current regulations that F1 has. Um, yeah, there was a multiple car vehicle incident. He was not the only driver to die that year, or no, not the only driver to have an accident similar to that. There was a young British driver whose car had a similar accident, which burst into a ball of flame, and he was dead. Um, so, and the FIA have regularly let down so many motorsport formulae when it comes to safety. Regularly let them down, and now the modern tracks are so antiseptic that it's gone too far the other way. I understand you want to make it as safe as possible. Um, I think NASCAR have got their safety just about right with the safer barrier and the crash structures of the cars. I think they've got their safety regs about right. Um, F1 is more reactionary when it comes to safety rather than proactionary. Yes, NASCAR had to act after Dale Earnhardt Sr. died, but there were those who said he was already dead before he hit the wall with the heart attack. So we can't be certain if he died at the wheel and then crashed, or crashed and then died as a result. But yeah, there were a fair few NASCAR accidents up to Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death that, had the safer barriers been in place and the cars been slightly safer, they would have lived. IndyCar is far more lethal than NASCAR, and it's open seat. We saw with Justin Wilson. If that's a NASCAR accident, he lives. So I'm not a big fan of the open cockpit, even with a Halo device, single seat, open wheel racing. I've gone off it. And Sophia Flörsch and her accident sums up why I've gone off single seater racing. It's because of the way the cars are now more powerful than they were. Doesn't matter the size of the engines; they are generally more powerful for power to weight ratio because they're lighter, and their aerodynamics. Once you get that front nose up, they fly. They get out of control, and it's just then you're down to the wind direction and is your aero package good enough to keep you going flat like that, or if you're going to flip over. The fact that she flew through the air like a missile is terrifying. But if she had actually stayed on the ground during that accident, she's dead. If she had had a massive throttle or brake failure, and so therefore is not fully able to steer that car, and she stayed on the ground, she hit that barrier, she is dead. But this is the FIA; they do regularly react to accidents rather than look at, by sending out a more experienced driver to test that track and go, actually, if you hit the curb here at any speed, or you have an incident here, you are going to hit that barrier at speed. This is where I wondered if they should have a driver per series who's more experienced, who may have retired as a race driver, to do sighting laps and say, actually, I'm not sure about this circuit. I'm not sure that these particular cars, single seaters, for example, in this case, are suitable safety wise for this track. The FIA don't do that; they should. But no, the Turkey Grand Prix was antiseptic and crap, and the Turkey Grand Prix circuit was terrible. I wouldn't bring it back. That's my personal opinion. I understand why fans like Turkey, but for me, it's too much like the Hungaroring, not enough overtaking, and I find it a little bit sleepy. And it's all F1. I find sleepy. What other massive instance? Fisichella at Interlagos, his last ever race win in F1. He won the race in a ball of flame. He crashed his car and he rolled over the line, and he was classed as finishing the race as the winner. And then I think Alonso crashed into him. It was either Fisichella or Alonso who crashed, and then the winner was, I think, Fisichella. And Interlagos a couple of years back, a decade ago. Big shunt on the last lap at Interlagos. Seen a few of them at Interlagos. That I remember in 1996. It was in the 40 Ford. Yes, 40 were a team, smaller than Minardi, and Luca Badoa rolled on the first corner. Actually, rolled dangerously his 40 Ford. Yes, that was a team in F1 in the 90s. Was 40, who went out of business midway through the season. But Luca Badoa was in his car and somehow managed to roll it quite dangerously. Very similar accident to Martin Brundle at Melbourne earlier the race before, and I've got it all on videotape. I have the whole season on of '96 on a videotape review. But that were two similar accidents, and Martin Brundle had two of exactly the same accident at you know Albert Park, Melbourne, in the first race of the '96 season. Again, though, a street circuit. Interlagos is just a dangerous circuit in general. There's been some bad accidents there. At Monaco in '96, when Olivier Panis wins, most of the cars crashed. Oh no, you just need to have an experienced ex-professional racing driver to do a sighting lap or two and just work out, okay, is this track actually safe in the days or weeks leading up to an event? I'm not saying that they should be affiliated with F3 or the touring car package or the F1, but get an ex-driver to do a sighting lap in a vehicle. It doesn't matter if it's a single seater or an enclosed cockpit car, and go, okay, in a saloon type car or a GT type car, we have to take this racing line to get around the corner safely. You don't want to overtake here. If you get it wrong, you're in the wall. In a single seater, you have to take the line maybe slightly over because of the aero package. I do think you need to have an ex-driver, as in an ex-professional race driver who's raced in that formula or has raced that circuit to do a sighting lap, because you don't know if what doesn't really have he doesn't have to go full throttle, but do a sighting lap to go, do they, if they have a really experienced driver going, hang on a sec, these are younger, less experienced drivers, is this track suitable for their skill set? Is this track suitable for their experience? Because Macau, it catches out some of the best drivers in the world have died there. So the fact she's only 17 and has lived is terrifying. That experienced drivers who've got 20 years of racing experience on her don't survive Macau. That is the crux of it. Is that's how dangerous that circuit is. It's not often that we discuss motorsport, and I haven't done a video on Sophia Flörsch yet because obviously she's had to have reconstructive surgery on her spine. She broke a vertebrae in her back. All she got was a broken back. She didn't paralyze herself. She just fractured a bone in her back out of that accident, and that's probably from the shaking around in the cockpit and the force going through her body. G forces has fractured a vertebra in her back. That is exceptionally lucky considering the. Yeah, Peter Brock is one of those. He's an Australian legend. He's not as well known outside of Australia, but yes, you could look at John Surtees' son in the British Formula 3. He got hit in the head with a tyre. A car in front had crashed, and the wheel bounced into the road, and he was going flat out. The marshals didn't have time to react. I think it was at Alton Park, and the wheel hit him in the head about 160 mile an hour. Very similar to Justin Wilson's accident with a bit of bodywork, bouncing back onto the track. And this is why I inherently dislike open wheel single seater racing. Accidents like that are more likely to happen when the suspension fails and is ripped off and the wheel bounces and the car coming into it. It's like Felipe Massa's accident when he was following Barrichello and the part failure that hit him in the head at 180 miles an hour and nearly killed him. You don't. Oh yeah, Sterling Moss has had loads. Graham Hill had one at Watkins Glen when he was literally thrown out the car, which made it exceptionally painful for him to keep racing, and he carried on racing with basically broken legs. His legs were wrecked after that accident. Graham Hill at Watkins Glen, I think it was Road America Watkins Glen, when he's thrown out the car and you actually see his legs get crushed by the car going over him. Sterling Moss had a few, yeah. Sterling Moss definitely had a few. Surtees had a few, and Surtees is the only guy to win the Grand Prix racing with motorcycles and cars. So, you know, when Lewis Hamilton goes on to motorcycle racing and wins MotoGP, then you can say he's the greatest of all time, because for me, John Surtees is the greatest motor racing icon of all time. But that's just me. Yep, Sterling Moss. At one year it was like 14, 15 deaths. So when Sterling Moss, we've had Jim Clark at Hockenheim. There's been a fair few. Well, look, if Ayrton Senna can die in a race, and he's a one of the greatest race drivers of all time. You know how lethal motorsport is when the world's best drivers and riders are dying. Nicky Hayden completes in a superbike race, just cycling home, gets hit in the head, and died. So it doesn't matter the experience level. We've seen world champions die on the track, and die in rallying, and die in motorcycle racing, and it does not matter the quality level or the experience level. Or you can be a newbie, you can be a rookie, or you can be one of the world's best drivers in your field, in your formula, and still die. And miraculously, we're having less fatalities now in motorsport than we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Absolutely. Car safety has gone on a long way. The motorcycle leathers now have these airbags inside. The vehicles are inherently safer. The tracks are generally, for the most part, got better barriers, better runoffs. The modern F1 tracks I find dull, but motor racing circuits domestically here in the UK and in Europe have gone under a lot of modifications. They've kept the gravel traps, they've kept the tyre walls, but they've also made sure that there's more dangerous corners. They've reduced the size of the curb necessarily. They may have widened the track a little bit, resurfaced. If it has issues with drainage, they've checked the drainage, Silverstone notwithstanding. But even so, Billy Munger's accident, he lost both his legs. And that was just rear-ending another car. So single-seat races still have the weaknesses in the nose cone and where the pedals are. It is what it is, but that's two young single-seat race car drivers who've had serious accidents, both of whom have survived. So had that been 20 years ago, they may not have. But both have had, one has had a very, very, very lucky escape with, I would still say, major injuries, but they're not life-threatening. Billy Munger's was actually life-threatening, but he's back racing. Yes, he's got prosthetic limbs, but again, the shunt he had looks pretty innocuous. It just looks like a standard rear ending where one car's mounted the other. He's gone underneath. What I think happened was the chassis failed, and where the pedals are, they went up into his legs. So it took 45 minutes to get him out of the car, which is exceptionally unusual in modern motorsport to take that long to get a driver out of the car. And I remember watching it, and you actually see the impact and you shudder because the car in front is stopped dead. It's not as if the car in front is slowing and he rear ends in. The car in front had spun out, got back on the track, and then stalled, and he hits him at about 120, 130 mile an hour straight up the arse. And it shattered his legs, basically. The legs below the knee were shattered. They tried to save one of them. They couldn't. A lot of surgeries. He basically had to have both his legs amputated. V8 supercars in Australia, that can get a bit gnarly and a bit dangerous as well. Having watched the Auckland races over here in the UK, we managed to get that on British TV. The V8 supercars. Having watched some of the accidents there weren't many, but there were enough for me to go. Again, 20 years ago, that could have been a far more serious accident with how the cars were built. The safety standards have improved, but I don't think you're ever fully going to remove the risk of death or serious injury from motorsport. That's part of the draw of it as well. Disturbing to say that, but you're never going to fully remove the risk attached and the danger attached to motorsport. We see every day on our normal roads people dying at lesser speeds than what the race cars go at. So when track days like the Nürburgring, when you have the public sessions, that's when most of the fatalities take place. But the fatalities still take place in race sessions as well. The Nürburgring is a killer. The Northleaf, if you were to do the full GP Northleaf whole circuit, and some people are brave enough to do that, firstly, it's physically tiring because you are. You got AMCO barriers, you got the metal ones, you got the tyre barriers, you have the airbag barriers, you have the hay bale, kind of the haystack barriers wrapped in plastic. Hay's a pretty good one, that really decelerates you. But the big issue is with the concrete barriers. When you've got the Amco that absorbs, Amco with tyres and an Amco is actually very, very good because it buckles inwards and flings you back out. It doesn't just stop you dead. There is an absorption of the energy through that barrier. Hence the safer barriers in NASCAR, where you have two concrete barriers with a bit in between that acts like an absorption spring. So it's actually softer. You still hit the concrete, but the concrete goes in and then to another layer of concrete or another layer of concrete, and it absorbs it like an accordion. It's all about the transition of energy. If it's just a solid concrete barrier, you're in a lot of trouble. If it's an Amco tyre barrier mix, that's a lot of absorption through the tyres, through the Amco, and then onto the concrete, which is a more less flexible barrier type. But look at the Nürburgring, you'll see the Amco barriers are the metal barriers going around the side of the Nürburgring, Nordschleife. When cars hit them, they buckle a little bit, and they do absorb a hell of an impact. Many other barriers have been tested. Concrete is lethal. It is lethal. It has no give. There is no give. It is exceptionally brittle and lethal. It's solid, but brittle. So you can chip chunks of concrete out of a barrier, but there is absolutely no give. You've got the air barriers, you've got gravel traps, tyre barriers, Amco, haystacks are used on some events. Those kind of plastic coverings you can get as well. The plastic barriers filled with water. Anything that's more that can absorb energy through the force waves going through and dissipating the forces involved. Concrete, it just stops you dead. It stops you dead. You don't want to hit concrete at any speed above 30 in a vehicle because you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're watching too much sci-fi because obviously you've got negative and positive poles, and it will automatically draw you in, then repulse you to draw you in. Magnetic barriers wouldn't work. Interesting theory. You'd have to they would work if you worked them, but then you would, when you're on the track, you pushed, and it would. Yeah. It's an interesting theory. I would like to see it in practice, whether you could actually race with magnetic barriers forcing you into the track, because that means overtaking would be interesting and dangerous, because then you would be just caught in a cycle. Interesting theory. We are seeing at racetracks, pit walls have to be the concrete to keep pit crews safe. And most start-finish straights are actually, as it says, a straight, so you shouldn't get too many cars going side on into the barrier at high speed, but it does happen. The worst ones are the high-speed corners, or coming out of a sectional section when you're going at high speed and getting it wrong there. They can be the most terrifying accidents. Schumacher did a lot for F1 safety. Yes, both Schumacher brothers did actually, because both Schumacher brothers had serious accidents that nearly killed them. Schumacher at Silverstone, Michael broke both his legs, and Ralph at Indianapolis broke his back. They were both instrumental on the safety side behind the scenes, and people forget that both Ralph and Michael Schumacher had serious accidents that nearly killed them. That had they happened in the 80s, they would have been killed. They would not be alive. Yeah, the darts. Raymond Van Barnevel's announcing his retirement from next year. The fart gate. I don't watch darts anymore. Again, because the TV coverage is not free to air. And I used to enjoy watching the darts, but as I've got older, I've enjoyed it less and less. I do have a friend who does play in the BDO pyramid, and he's ranked about 600 or so in the world in the BDO rankings. So I do know a professional darts player, and he still actually works a full-time job as well, because there isn't the money at the lower levels. The issue with some of the sports, yeah, there is an issue with coverage. But back to the motorsport. My favourite type of motorsport is rallying and motocross, and they are inherently dangerous. I've had a friend die at a British motocross track when I was at college. I've got friends who do motocross, so I know how lethal motorsport is. I know someone who died doing it. So in that respect, when you find out your friends died in a motocross accident in a qualifying event, he was doing a dry run, just doing a test run, and he got impaled on one of the safety barriers. They had used the wrong type of barrier. It had the metal hook like that, and he impaled himself. He came off a jump wrong, and yeah. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. Motorsport is inherently dangerous. As I said, I've known someone who's been killed in a motocross accident at a local motocross circuit that's now been shut down for safety reasons because they were not safe enough. They were proven to be too dangerous. Um, there was more accidents there than there should have been on average. They work out, okay, the level of racing. These guys are competent. Why is it that this circuit's having a lot more accidents than a comparable circuit on the calendar? And then they had a fatality, and they're like, "Hang on a second, we've got to investigate this," because whenever there's a fatality at a racing event, they have to investigate what could have been done to avoid the fatality. And if it's down to the motor vehicle itself failing an inspection or having a mechanical failure, that rules out necessarily the track reliability or how they start to look at, even with a mechanical failure, could the guy have survived? In this sense, no. But Macau, I'm surprised it's still going as a racetrack. I know drivers want to test themselves by going around it, much like the Nürburgring, much like Monaco, and doing a lap of an iconic track. But it's a killer. Even Monaco has killed people. Nürburgring kills people. No racetrack is 100% safe. But I will say this: fatalities in motorsport are a lot less now than what they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. But there are some circuits that how they still considered usable by modern standards. There is no way Macau is up to modern safety standards. Not at all. It's lethal. It's too tight. Not enough width, and some corners you're going in still at 100 plus mile an hour. If one car goes wide in, hits a barrier, it's blocking the road, and then you have a dangerous pile up. Dangerous pile up. And it doesn't matter if it's single seater, motorcycles, or saloon car racing. It just takes one car to catch fire badly, to be trapped, and that's all you need to know. When they all pile up and all pile into each other, plain and simple, that's all you need to know about Macau. So I think Monaco is a far safer track than Macau. Yep, same. Yeah, I understand that it's like the ski slopes: black run, red run, blue run, green run. Green being like a 2-year-old could do it. Black run means actually you might want to be a professional downhill skier to do it. Yeah, there is the difficulty rating. We'll call it the difficulty rating, not the safety rating. The difficulty. 5-star means you should be superhuman and have like mutant powers. 1 means a trained monkey could do it. I get the kayaking danger rating. It makes logical sense. The higher the number, the more dangerous it is. I've done, I would say, up to about level 3 at a push, definitely 2, and I felt not in my element. I didn't feel comfortable. I'm not really a water sports kind of guy. Activity, more watching, I will do, but doing it actually as the person competing, not for me. I will happily watch people do kayaking and canoeing and whitewater rafting. Honestly, when you're getting up to those dangerous levels, it's like base jumping. I think 1 in 16 base jumpers or 1 in 60 die every day. So every 60 base jumpers, someone's going to die today out of 60 people who do it. Base jumping and that kind of physical activity, there are some that's lethal, and it is just for adrenaline junkies. That's why people go around the Nürburgring in their everyday road car. They are adrenaline junkies. They don't modify it correctly for the course. They just pay their entrance fee. They go for it. They have the safety meeting. They go around the course and kill themselves. Even fully professional drivers who've been driving for 20, 30 years go, why I'm not doing this. So sports safety and the welfare is exceptionally important. Absolutely. You see, so this doesn't make the sporting news because it's such a minor sport without the coverage and it doesn't have the sponsorship that say the football or the rugby or the rugby league or the motorsport has. It doesn't make the international news or make a big story because it's some adrenaline junkie who's died doing a niche activity. But it happens, and the fact that some of these adrenaline junkie type activities or sports like paragliding and base jumping have such a high fatality rate, it says how nuts you have to be to do it. So the X Games is growing in popularity. A lot of the sports in the X Games have a high fatality rate compared to more traditional sports. It is what it is. But no, athlete welfare is exceptionally important, and risk assessment is important. Obviously, we don't want to go all mollycoddle wrapping in bubble wrap and cotton wool, but some sports are inherently more dangerous than others, and motorsports happens to be that. Any one of these whiny people we should ban it is clueless about what it is in human nature to challenge oneself to push the boundaries of what is possible. But it is what it is. Some sports, as I say, are far more lethal than others, and what we've seen this weekend is a very lucky escape for a young, talented driver in motorsport. How Macau, though, remains a racetrack in this day and age, though, I have no idea. You just have to see the accidents at Macau. Sophia Flörsch is exceptionally lucky to still be alive. And the guy she hit as well, he's also lucky to still be alive, let alone the people on the other side of the safety barrier where she crashed, the media people and the marshals. They all shouldn't be alive. That was a stroke of luck that she hit the barrier at the angle she did and the height she did. Any lower, I don't know. You can get that lucky punch that can kill someone straight out. We've seen in boxing, boxers get die in the ring in my lifetime. Horses, no, you can't. But surprisingly, actually, very few jockeys have actually died in a national hunt race. Very, very few have died. It's not as it is a dangerous sport. Jockeys have died, but very, very few actually are killed every year. Very, very. It's so minute. It's like a couple. On a bad year, it's like 2 or 3 on a bad year. It really is. It's a lot safer than people realise all the body armor they actually wear. But again, yeah, inherently dangerous sport. There is a risk of death or serious injury, both to rider and horse. Obviously, a lot of horses die every year, and that is regrettable. But funny thing is, national hunt horses, not flat race horses. Flat race horse racing is abhorrent. I don't like the flat. I prefer the national hunt. The national hunt horses are treated better than humans. They are. You have to look how they look after the jump horses who do the horse racing over fences. They are far better looked after than people by the hospitals here. They get the best care. I've got friends who work with horses and work in the horse racing industry, and they tell me that flat horses that are raced on the flat are not looked after well at all. Horses that are raced over national hunt, they're looked after very, very well. Horses that race on the flat are expendable. Horses that race national hunt, they could die in any race. So they are looked after so well. And I've seen some of them; they are actually beautiful animals. But the debate over horse racing continues, and the whiny left wing animal rights loons, who, bear in mind, the medications they take are all tested on animals. Just putting it out there. Without some of those medications and those advances in medical science, they would have died. Some of those people, those animal rights loons. So let's put that out there with the defeating syphilis and smallpox and things like that. A lot of that was done by testing on animals. So that defeats the animal rights argument. Anywho, I'm going to leave that there because talking about some of the serious things we talked about, which includes athlete welfare today, and the Jared Hayne thing, I'm going to have to look into that. I knew about Paul Gascoigne, and I knew what was going on with Paul Gascoigne. The Jared Hayne one is news to me. That obviously he's now in a police station custody. But it doesn't surprise me that he has gone down the path that he's gone down. He's been badly advised as a younger player. His career has taken a bizarre twist since 2014. And I'm going to have to look at the Jared Hayne story because Obviously, I'm the time difference of 12 hours. Um, so obviously for you, that would be late evening for Australian time and very early morning for English time. I did get in about 3 o'clock this morning, but I had to go to a physio appointment. So I was at the doctor's appointment when I woke up. I had to literally rush from my house, go to the doctor's, and come back. And then I went on live stream. Literally, that's my day so far. I've woken up. I've had a milkshake, strawberry milkshake actually, very nice. And the Jared Hayne thing. Until we know more about what's actually happening and any kind of press release, be it from the police and the parties involved, and we will have to wait. If any charges are brought, then we can speculate, what's going to happen. But Jared Hayne has obviously got off-field issues when he was playing in the NFL, and he obviously clearly has off-field issues now back in the NRL. So we can question his mentality, we can question those around him advising him, and we can question the sport about having this culture, this macho drinking lads culture, because clearly that's also part of the problem. And it's not just an NRL problem; it's a wider sport problem that needs to be looked at. I'm not saying that they should all go all feminine now. I'm saying that it's a hard man sport, but there has to be a line between being a brutal player on the field and a gentleman off it. And Jared Hayne clearly comes across as an arsehole. He always has. I've never liked Jared Hayne. Talented that he is as a player, I've never liked him. There's something about him I don't like. There's an attitude about his I don't like. There's an entitled attitude I don't like, and that's part of the problem. He was given a lot of money very, very young on a big contract at Parramatta. He goes to the NFL where he can earn a lot more money, which he did. He earned a fair chunk in the NFL. He's come back to the NRL. He's caused chaos at Gold Coast with his attitude. Oh, we don't know the full ins and outs of what happened at Gold Coast, but it wasn't a happy time. He's now gone from Gold Coast back to Parramatta. It hasn't worked out, and then this is all broken with the backdrop of what's happening in San Francisco, which was news anyway. And now he's out of a job and facing prison. Basically, is what we're looking at. The last 4 or 5 years of his career have been a very interesting yet not happy time. And I'm being honest. I honestly think I have concerns where this could end up for Jared Hayne, and his reputation that he's earned on the field is going down the toilet off it. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all the questions. We've debated some very dark topics today, which normally I wouldn't do on a live stream, but it needs to be raised. The culture within rugby league, I've noticed, is a big drink problem. Big drink problem within rugby league. And I'll have to look into that Jared Haynes story. Whether I do a video on it separately or whether I discuss it on live stream is another thing. Because we have to look at what information has been released and what is actually in the public domain that we can actually talk about. Because obviously it's an ongoing legal thing, and we've seen before people prejudice any kind of trial legal process by saying things or doing things on social media. So we have to be careful with that. And I always give that advice to other YouTubers: is be careful what you say regarding an ongoing legal investigation, because speculation is exceptionally dangerous, and trial by media is dangerous, especially social media. It undermines the legal systems that we have. So we have to be very, very careful how we approach discussing an ongoing legal thing. The Paul Gascoigne one I did know about. I did know he had been arrested. Well, it wasn't all dark, yeah, admittedly. Well, actually, no, it was pretty negative. I'm not happy with this live stream. Not many positives. I was talking about the rugby to begin with, and you guys all came in, and it all got a little bit shitty. Yeah. Anyway, it wasn't all dark, but the Paul Gascoigne one I was aware of. I remember it breaking in August, early September, that he had been arrested on suspicion of an offence. But with Paul Gascoigne, we have to assume that he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol and wasn't in a fit state to realise what he was doing. Because drugs and alcohol do that. They drop your personal boundaries of what is and isn't acceptable. And Paul Gascoigne is clearly a case of someone who needs to have help. I'm surprised Paul Gascoigne is still alive, to be honest. Looking at him, he's not in a healthy state, mentally or physically. I wouldn't be surprised if Gascoigne doesn't have long left. But we look at his private life when he was married and some of the things he did to his wife. And he used to beat up his wife and do some horrible things that have come out about Paul Gascoigne's private life. But again, the drugs and alcohol, you take that out of him, he's not the same. He's a decent person. The drugs and alcohol have made him what he is today. Jared Haynes a different one. I think that's down to having bad people around him and not respecting respecting others in general. I think he's got that entitled air about him, which is entitled arrogance that will be his undoing. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers for all the comments and subscriptions. I don't think this live stream will be the most popular live stream that's watched, but hey ho, I will have to look into the Jared Hayne, what's happening with Jared Hayne now, because that's going to be interesting. I'll have to read through as much as possible and gather as much information as possible on the Jared Hayne story, because last week I released a video. I did a video of where does he play next year? Now I don't think he has a career now. I think allegations are proven true. He's done. He is done. Done. And this could be one of the biggest sports scandals in Australian history with Jared Hayne. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you soon.